welcome to the inaugural talk in the Let's Talk event. I can see some faces, I can see some familiar names and some not so familiar names. If I know you, hiya. If I don't, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here and joining us as well. Just some information for those who don't know. We have the chat box is live, so if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please just pop them into the chat box and we will take them in the Q&A session. If you want to send in questions anonymously, please do so via Slido. It doesn't record your IP address and it doesn't record your name. It just sends the questions automatically to me and we can ask our speakers your questions and address them. And hopefully we will be able to have a great session today. All our speakers are live and ready to go. I'll just give you a bit of a background in terms of why we started this and why we've done this today. I launched a virtual dating experience during the coronavirus pandemic when most of us were on lockdown. And so far we've scheduled over 300 dates for Christian singles. It was done in a blind dating fashion, speed dating fashion via this same platform, Zoom. And they got to meet each other, talk to each other. Some of them made connections. Some of them have taken their chats away from Zoom and now they're talking on mobile phones, which is just fantastic. And, you know, I believe in relationships. I believe that God is a God of relationships and he loves that. And obviously we struggled to, you know, cultivate new relationships during the lockdown. So that was an amazing opportunity to do so. However, a lot of people started asking about vulnerability and men and why don't men show their emotions? Do men have emotions? Do men cry? Do they get sad? Why don't they talk about how they're feeling? Why is it so difficult for us to understand why they're feeling the way that they do? And so we did a poll. And all the men said that they do get emotions, they do have vulnerable moments, they do feel certain ways, but women just don't understand. Most of the women voted that men pretend, all the men voted that women don't understand. And we thought, why don't we give the men an opportunity to share their heart and let us know exactly, you know, what goes on in their minds and why sometimes that is not translated in terms of language that women understand. And God loves diversity, so he has made men and women in different ways. We interpret emotion differently, we express emotion differently, but he has brought us in unity together in relationships as brothers, as sisters in Christ, but also as husbands and wives. And we need to understand each other so that we can have a peaceful home and raise children in a godly environment. And God does say that, you know, men, treat your wives with understanding. So we really ought to learn how to understand each other. So that is why we're here. So hopefully the Spirit of God will do the teaching through our amazing, amazing speakers who are all submitted to the Lord and whom I respect so much in their lives and in their marriages. So we're going to start and I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is a medical doctor. He is the husband of one wife. He is the father of one amazing, amazing daughter. He is a gospel artist. He is a songwriter and he has one very happy wife. So over to you, Dr. Sue. You've muted yourself again. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon or evening or morning from wherever you're connecting. So I'm Jeffrey or Seme, or yeah, I was just telling Dami and the others before they came online the origin of my name, but I won't bore you with that. But yes, so you can call me Seme or Jeffrey, and I just want to say it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Dami, for organizing this. I know it's a difficult topic, and I don't really know why she felt that I would be able to talk about this, but fine, I'll give it a shot. I can see my mom actually, which took me by surprise. My mom is attending.
Oh wow!
Told me a few seconds ago that she couldn't hear anything, but I hope she can hear this. So I'm honored. My mom is online, and I can see my younger brother as well.
Oh,
And
hello.
I'm seeing my pastor here as well, Pastor Dominic. and my wife is online. So for every other person who is attending this, I'm honored. Thank you for coming, and I'm sure this will be a blessing to everyone. Okay. I should give a quick disclaimer before I go on. I'm going to speak based on my experience, my beliefs, my background as a Black man born and bred mostly in Nigeria. So a lot of what I'll say will be true to me, will probably be true to a lot of people, may not be true for everyone. And if I say things that sound like generalizations, I apologize, because just know that everything is not going to be totally true, but will be mostly true, be true for most people, at least true for me. And the least I can do is to be honest with you. So that said, I hope I don't step on any toes, and I'll go right into it. So the first thing I noticed when this talk came on and I shared it on social media, I had about 3 of my friends, 3 male friends. They sent me 3 messages independently. And one of them said, are men vulnerable? And the other one said, oh, I'm not going to cry. Men want women, women want men to cry, so I'm not going to cry. And the other said, I can't remember what the other said, but the 3 of them expressed the same emotion that I guess has brought the topic in the first place, about men and vulnerability, and if we do have emotions. So of course it was banter, and I replied all of them, and we chatted a bit about that. Sadly, I think just one of them was able to attend today. All right, I'll go right into it. So I guess it's a topic and it's a conversation that is always going to go on. But I'll just say emotions. I had to check, do men really have emotions? Clearly we do. I'm a doctor. I know that being emotional is part of being human, but it's important to probably talk about the definition of emotions. I checked quickly, and I saw that an emotion is a strong feeling deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. And to be honest, that sums up a lot. If we understand that about emotions, we can understand where things are coming from. So there should be no question about it. I know that men are emotional. We do have emotions. And the next question will be vulnerability. And I think this was a bit more scary. What is vulnerability? Let me see if I have this open. I think I had it. Oh, yeah. So I don't know if you can see me, but I'll read this out. It says vulnerability is the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. Now, that's pretty scary. So no one, male or female, would enjoy being vulnerable. No one would intentionally be vulnerable. But just with the definition of the word vulnerability alone, we do get vulnerable sometimes. And yes, again, because of what the word means and the feeling that it gives us, all men and women, again, will try to hide vulnerability, but I guess the differences just come with how all these things are expressed. So I think the foundation is to remember that men and women are innately different for a number of reasons. One of the reasons would be biology or genetics. A lot of the reasons would have to do with upbringing, how our parents brought us up, what we're taught in church, how our mates and friends talked with us, and what we've been told over the years, and what the environment expects of us. So these things affect the way we express all these emotions. So I'm going to speak about why ladies would tend to either misunderstand the male emotions or misinterpret the male emotions. So there's some things you should know about men. Men are emotional, but we are more practical than I want to say more practical than emotional, but yeah, I'm sure you get what I'm trying to pass across. When circumstances happen or events happen, men would respond emotionally, yes, but for most men, the next thing a man is thinking is, what do I do about it? What's the next step to take? So for most women, again, I'm not sure if this is solely due to genetics or if it's due to the surrounding or how they relate. For women, it's a bit different. Women want to know what to do, but women tend to absorb it in and soak in the experience. And either they take what men may feel is a delayed response, or many times actually women take a more calculated response, calculated in a way because they've weighed everything, they've absorbed it, and then they react following the absorption of the emotion. So that explains the difference. Neither is good and neither is bad. So I'm not necessarily saying that men are good in responding this way or are bad. It's just to understand that men, for all the reasons I've listed earlier, tend to be more responsive than overwhelmed, if you like, with the emotion of the situation. They get on with it, if you like. Second thing is that men are competitive. Men are competitive for a number of reasons, so many reasons. I've thought of this so many times. Why are we so competitive? I think it has a lot to do first of all, with maybe physical makeup. We are brought up, we are born and we are strong. We are naturally physically stronger than women. I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but if you look at it physically, it's true. We are encouraged and pushed by our parents, oftentimes for different reasons. Again, I can't go into that. But we're often told in school, oh, don't let somebody else beat you. Don't let the girl beat you. Don't let the girl be the class monitor. You are the boy. You should be the class monitor. Now, please, that is not the subject. But you need to understand where we are coming from, because I'm not going to talk so much about feminism. But it's important to understand why we're that way. But men are not competitive against the women. Men are competitive against everybody. A man wants to be faster than who's driving beside him. He doesn't care if it's a man or a woman. He may take it a bit more personal if it's a woman, but the reality is that every man wants to be better, not in a negative way to who he's competing against. And I watched the Netflix series recently on Michael Jordan, and it talked about how he sets personal targets for himself. Michael Jordan was such a good athlete, but he would just annoy himself, if you like, and I have to be better than this guy. He didn't have anything against them. So you have to know that whoever you're dating or you're planning to date or you're married to is going to be competitive. It's how we get things done. We want to be better than we were yesterday. And that's, please don't try to take that from the man. Don't be offended by it. Don't try to take it away. It's probably why you got interested in him in the first place, if you think of it. But and then men, again, are practical protectors. We want to protect the things around us. So we tend to fight a lot. We defend what we believe in. We defend family. If you want to annoy a married man, just threaten his wife or his family. You're going to see a him that he didn't know existed, or threaten his mother, or say something against something he loves, or insult his football club if he's a football fan. A strong defense mechanism just comes out. Again, a lot of it has to do with genetics, a lot has to do with biology, a lot has to do with the environment. But these things are true for, again, most men, okay? And especially most Black men, for the Blacks here among us. So remember that that's, again, it's not a bad thing, and it won't change. For the majority of men, and this part is funny, majority of men are overwhelmed by tears. We don't know how to respond to tears, okay? If any man knows how to respond to tears now, it's come out of a place of learning and training. Just because for most Black men, again, we're taught don't cry, or instead of crying, do something about it. So it's come over time. And if everyone is crying in the house anyway, the man thinks, okay, my wife is crying, I'm crying, or my girlfriend is crying, I'm crying. Who does something? So we don't spend too much time crying. Men do cry, but I'll tell you that most men don't cry for too long. You cry, you get on with what you have to do. So this may explain why when you're having an argument with your boyfriend and you start crying, he just loses it. It's like, what do I do now? Or where has this come from? How do I respond to this? And it oftentimes when we reflect on arguments, I think most men feel manipulated by tears, if you like, because you're having an argument, you're trying to reason out a situation, and the person you're dating bursts out in tears. You're like, okay, you've made this an unlevel playing ground, because I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry with you. So how do we do this? So if you understand some of these things, there's no time. So I'm not going to bore you with all my ideas and reasonings, but these things will explain some of the things about men. The other things I've written here is, okay, about vulnerability, and I'll say just a line on this, because I think vulnerability is such a difficult subject that I don't know if I'm the most vulnerable myself, so I can only speak for myself. But I will say that being vulnerable comes with time, okay? This talk means different things to different people. So some people here may be married and you're talking about a spouse, but if you're talking about a guy who is asking you out now, who you met last week, and you expect him to be vulnerable, It's difficult because vulnerability comes with time and trust, and it comes in layers. And the more time you spend with somebody, male or female, the more you're going to be able to open up with them. So I'll just say be patient, but apply some of this, what I think are practical things I've worked for myself, to understand men. So how do we understand men and their emotions? In addition to all the things I've said before, one thing that's worked for me is ask men. Okay, if a man is doing something, just honestly ask the person, why are you doing what you're doing, and what does this mean? I'll tell you the honest truth. Most men will tell you straight up. They may not tell you in the way you want to hear it, but they'll tell you, and they'll pass a message across to you why they're doing what they're doing. They'll tell you why I'm leaving the house, why I'm ending the call, why I'm ending the relationship, why I can't stop drinking. If you really want to hear, they'll tell you. But do not ask in an angry place. The thing about anger is this: if you're angry and you ask a man something, again, I'm speaking for myself and most of the friends I know. When you're angry or upset and you ask a question, unfortunately, we don't hear you. What we think we hear you, because later on, after an argument, I'm like, okay, that's what she was actually saying. But if you speak passionately, angrily, upset about something, what we really get is the vibe. And if you know men don't know how to, if you give a man aggression, because of that protective thing I told you before, he wants to protect his space and himself. So he comes out defensive, and then you get annoyed, and then you don't get anything really. So take a deep breath, calm down. When things are better, ask him why you did that, why you do this, or why you don't do this. And then they can tell you. But the best conversations I've had would be if you just ask me straight up, why do you do this? So the next point is with the same vein. Be straight with a man, okay? We don't like all those, I'm giving him a sign, or I'm giving him a code, or there's this, if I wear this earring, he will get the point. You bought this earring for me last year, so I'm wearing the earring to show that I appreciate you. I don't remember the gifts I buy for my wife. I know it sounds crazy, but I actually don't remember. So when she puts on the wristwatch to say, oh, I'm feeling love, I don't get it. So just tell me, I'm feeling love, okay? Be straight with me. Don't do all that. Some men are different with training and time, but just sisters, trust me, most men, we don't get it. So just be straight, okay? Get to know a man's friends and family if you are really interested in knowing him. The reason why it's important is because for family, first of all, the family is the way a man relates with his, and this is especially important for mothers, and my mom is online, but the way a man relates his expressions with his mom would give you a guide on how he expresses love, okay? Most men who are very good with expressing love with their moms will probably not struggle to express love to you. But if a man, for different reasons, is not that expressive of love with his mom, who he clearly loves, because most men love their moms. If a man cannot express love with his mom, unless there are other deep-rooted issues, so I'm talking about most men who have a good relationship with their mom, if a man cannot express that, don't expect the man to be the type buying roses and cars and flowers. He will learn. I'm not saying it's a dead case. It's just for you to know what to expect. So if you are able to get that information, that will help you put things into perspective. And then learning how he interacts with his friends as well. You're likely going to see a man most vulnerable when he's with his long-term friends doing things that he loves to do. Rounding up now, the other thing is men want to be respected. I know it's cliche, but it's true. So most men these days are realizing now what it is to respect women as well. But the truth is, if you want to pass a message, an important message across to a man, don't shout at him, don't insult him, don't compare him, don't make him feel less than he, because most men already believe to themselves in their mind. So if a man reacts to something you're saying and he gets very upset, it's probably because he has thought about it before. It's not something he likes to think about, and then you're throwing it at him. Your message is going to get lost. So instead of saying something like, why don't you wear the suit like Brother James would wear? You can just simply say the same thing in a different way without mentioning Brother James. And you can just suggest it, or buy him the suit and say, or just say, I think he will really look good in a suit. He will take it better than if you tell him that, oh, Brother James really looked nice in that suit. And I think the last point I have here, because I'm really curious to see what the others have got to say, is that, yeah, if you want to know what a man thinks, generally watch his reaction to popular issues. And this is especially important now. If you want to know if a man respects women, watch how he reacts to women around you, how he reacts to the waitresses, how he reacts to news about rape, Black Lives Matter. you need to watch what he does, because especially if it's a man who is not a baby, it's not likely he's going to change many of those ideas now. So you want to really know what he thinks. If it's something that you can educate and argue about and or manage, fine. But if you're dealing with a man who looks down on women innately, or sees a woman boss or a woman pastor, for example, a woman above him as a problem, and he says it in so many words, and you know you can't handle that, please don't come and act surprised in 5 years' time, because not likely going to change. Okay, so I think I'll stop there. I'm curious to hear the others and hear the questions and feedback at the end. Okay.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. And I really love that final point that you mentioned in terms of how a man responds to a woman in a position of authority, in the workplace, in the church. It's so crucial. And seeing how they respond to other people. One of our polls yesterday on the Instagram for our datas was, would you go on a second date with a man if he was rude to the waiter or the waitresses? And it was quite interesting to see the answers that a lot of people were giving. We do have one question for you. So it says, does that mean that in being defensive, a man will not admit his wrongdoing at that point and then evade the situation, or just straight on lie that they are not wrong? If we have to sugarcoat our words to feed their ego, how come they don't sugarcoat their own words?
Okay, so again, you have to remember that people are different, okay? So this will not be true for everybody, and different situations are different for different people. Now, in the heat of the moment, it's not practical for me to tell you never correct or disagree with somebody when you're upset. What I'm saying is, if you expect to pass a message across at that time, you're not going to achieve that. So if, for example, let's give a practical example. Let's say you're tired of somebody always, I don't know, putting their shoes on your sofa. And at that moment, if you scream and say, why are you putting your shoes on the sofa? The man is likely, unfortunately, going to respond by saying, oh, I'm tired and it's my sofa anyway, or something like that. But if you were to calm down and explain later on, obviously he knows, I tell you, he knows he shouldn't be doing that anyway, but we just have bad habits. But if you tell him later on, putting your foot on the sofa is not nice. You're ruining the chair, and I've been telling you this for a while. Why aren't you doing this? It's more likely that he will get your message across, or you will get your message across when you're calmer. So I'm not going to defend anybody denying if what they did, if right or wrong. Everyone should own up to their wrongs, but you have to be patient, because, and this is true for men and women, you might not get your apology when you want it. Okay, so you have to be patient. Allow people not quarrel. Allow people disagree. Feel free to have a disagreement. Walk away from it. Don't feel you have to solve every issue now. That's the other thing. Many ladies want to solve the issue there and then. It may not always happen. Give it time. State your point, but give it time and come back to it later on. There's no emergency with it, unless it's something life-threatening, to be honest.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeff. Everyone stick around. Jeff is still going to join us for the Q&A once we've heard from all our speakers. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. So next, we're going to hear from Josh Ablade. Josh? I can't seem to. You can unmute yourself, Josh. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. That is great. That's fantastic. So Josh is the husband of one wife, another happy wife. He is also a competitive athlete, a sprinter. He is a systems engineer. He is the co-chair of the 18 to 30s group of the OFNC, and he's also a director at BAFA. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And yeah, thank you for joining us in this space for us to hear from each other as well as learn. And I want to say thank you to Dami for the initiative to start something like this. It's a good space for people to get to share, and thank you for the opportunity as well. Vulnerability and men have feelings as well. I think that statement in itself, men have feelings too, is something which we all know. It's just because maybe some, not just women, but men also can say that, you know, I don't see enough from other men in way of emotions and vulnerability. But before I get into it, I wanted to do some research on the word itself, vulnerability, and find out more about that. And then based on my experiences as well as what I've learned, share today. So some of the things you mentioned about me are true. I've been married for 4 years now. Well, no, sorry, it'll be 4 years in October, beg your pardon. And that in itself has been a big process about learning to be vulnerable. But the relationship itself and when it began has been a process about that. So in my research, the word vulnerable, it comes from the Latin noun, which is wound. So wound is a Latin word for vulnerable. And then from that, the Latin verb vulnerable is being derived. So when we hear that, you know that to be vulnerable is to be physically open to being hurt. But vulnerability in this aspect we're talking about is emotionally, because that's where all that comes out of. So I want to give that context to start with. But also the word itself, it's always given in the negative light. But I want us to focus on a positive aspect of the word today, because a lot of us would have been in a position where, married or not, even if you've been in a relationship or even when it comes to discussions, you always hear people say, who said I love you first? What I want us to focus on today is that when you ask that question, in other words, you can say, who opened the door? Because the person who said I love you first, it means that you're going to get a response of one sort. Either that person says, oh, they don't say I love you, or they say that. And so in being vulnerable, you put yourself in a position where you give the other person a chance to also show their vulnerability. So I want us to highlight that. But also I think to all the men on this call today, I want to ask 2 questions that I want you to think about while we're discussing, and to even discuss with your own friends once we finished here. So write down 2 things that in your friendship groups, you are the one who's known to be the one to go to for that. So let's say Ayo here, for example, is a photographer. Ayo and he's a very good photographer at that as well. In his friendship circles, people come to him. In his business, people come to him for that. Let's imagine that Ayo now needs somebody to do what he's good at. Who would Ayo go to? Would he give people the chance to do what he knows he's good at? So the question is, think about 2 things that you're good at. And within your friendship circles, would you allow some of your friends to help you out with that? And the reason why I'm asking you to think about that is because when you give other people the chance to show their strengths or to show the strengths you have in yourself, it makes you realize that, you know what, other people can also do this. And it gives a safer space for people to express themselves. The second thing is, write down 1 thing that you would like to say or ask to a brother, a father, or a friend that you haven't yet said. So I want to leave those things there. And I'll get back to what I want to share about vulnerability. So the word itself, and I think I said I wanted to focus on it from a positive aspect. A lot of times we hear the narrative of our fathers and our uncles, our grandfathers of not being very open in terms of how they express their emotions to us. Now, forget about relationships with women, for example. We don't see enough from our fathers and our uncles and our grandfathers. And as a result, that conditioning sometimes means that we are also limiting how we express that. That's not to say some men don't go the other way and fully express themselves, because again, like Jeff said earlier on, men express their emotions differently to what women expect. And that expectation is also key. Women express their emotions in a particular way. So it's important for women not to expect men to express those emotions in the same way. And I believe we all know and understand that sometimes in a situation that's difficult to perceive or difficult to think about, because it's in your mind, it has to be straightforward, but the man doesn't behave that way, so it's not straightforward. But anyway, forgetting about the fact that, because me myself, growing up in my environment, I can't say I had a lot of men who were very expressive with their emotions or even very vulnerable about their life experiences to a level that I can relate and engage with. You will hear stories and it'll be very surface level, I'd like to say. They won't really go into, and it's down to me to ask questions as well. Because me asking somebody a question about how did they deal with lust, for example, how did they deal with failing at school? How did they deal with not being the most popular person in school? All those things are questions which at every stage in life, they'll become relevant. So forgetting that environment wasn't there. Let's say I had a good environment where I could speak to anybody I wanted, people could speak to me and I could take a lot from them. What does that look like now for us sat here today and for people who are going to be coming down the line in our circles? Are we going to keep creating a space for people to share about themselves, to own their weaknesses? And I have one scripture that I want to read from the Bible, and I'll get to that shortly. And from that scripture, we can then really look at how being able to expose ourselves, because that's what vulnerability is. When you're vulnerable, you take a layer of yourself, you expose yourself to be seen a bit more. And just a few days ago, a friend of mine, we were speaking about something, and he called me and we were talking about a particular issue. And even in talking about that, we reflected on it, we spoke, we listened. And then the day later, I was thinking about it, reflecting, and even I found myself calling him as well to even share things that were in my experiences, which I didn't really think, oh, do you know what? Maybe I should talk to somebody else about this. And sometimes when one person takes that step to open the door, it gives you a space to, number one, still build on your friendship and have more things to connect with, engage with. But also you create a space, you open the door for not just the other person to walk into, but for you also to walk into. And vulnerability comes from a point of view of, okay, if you open yourself up to be exposed, if that exposure is not reflected in a positive way, there's going to be hurt. And it's important for us to know that we can deal with the disappointments of relationships. The disappointments of being vulnerable to people is something that we shouldn't neglect. And oftentimes it's very easy to just dismiss the disappointments we've experienced in being vulnerable to somebody, be it your friends at school, be it when you asked out the first girl ever, be it when you sent that message to somebody, you made that call, nobody responded. So it's important to know that dealing with the disappointments of being vulnerable is also something we should address and not neglect. So I have 5 more minutes before I'll keep quiet. So let me read the scripture that I've got, and then I'll summarize. So I want to read from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. And that talks about, Christ is saying a lot of things there, but essentially, and we all would have heard it before. For those who aren't Christians, you can look it up. And Jesus was saying that my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities than the power of Christ may rest upon me. So essentially, Jesus is saying that his grace is enough for us, and that we should boast in our weaknesses. We should be, and the word boast itself is like, yeah, put it on a list, put it on a signpost and say, look, this is what I'm not good at. This is the thing that I've been struggling with. This is where I need to learn. And nobody would want to be shouting about their weaknesses. But like in our generation now, nobody's going to plaster it on social media saying, you know what, I'm the guy what example can I even use? Most people will not talk about the bad parts about them. If I'm somebody who I can be rude to my wife from time to time because of selfish ambition, I wouldn't be putting that on any of my platforms that I'm known for or I'm known on. And so nobody would naturally in their mind want to share their weaknesses because it comes across as shameful or something that is hurtful. But Jesus is saying to us that when we are able to confidently say that, do you know what, I'm not good at this, we open the door for somebody else to lead us, to teach us, and to help us. And so I want to just put that scripture there. Look into it for yourself, understand it, and based on the word vulnerability, see how you putting yourself in a position where you share with other people the things that you're not good at. You then give them a chance to be good at something while encouraging you. So that's one scripture I wanted to share. And also I think vulnerability in the experiences we've had, and I've had as well. I wrote down that we have to be willing to unlearn the things that we know about vulnerability, which aren't right, in order to be able to learn the right things about vulnerability, because it's something that is relevant in relationships, in life. So if we're not willing to unlearn the things that we think we know about vulnerability, we will always be, I don't want to say narrow-minded, but we'll always be misguided in some ways about the word. So something like this today is a good way of being able to step back, take things in, unlearn the things that are not right about vulnerability, because we hear vulnerability as a weakness, but really to be vulnerable, it takes courage, it takes boldness. And once we can do that, we're actually showing strength. And like Jesus says, his strength is made perfect where we are weak. And for me, that's one thing that helps me deal with that word. So in summary, I want to say that, and I've lost it amongst all the other things I've written down. Yeah, imagine you throw a child in the air. That child, knowing that, you know what, and I shared this with my family the other day, you throw a child in the air, that child trusts that you're going to catch them on their way back down. And at that moment in time, that child is vulnerable. But at the same time, you know that you trust them enough. They might not even know that they trust you, but they say, do it again, because once they've gone up and it's scary, and on the way back down, they scream, they realize that, you know what, yeah, that was fun, and I know that they're going to catch me, even though it was scary when I got to the top. That's one thing. The second thing is, as men, and that's all I can speak for, we have to be willing to show a picture of reality rather than perfection when it comes to vulnerability. We have to show reality in these things. And so nobody's demanding perfection, and I believe we all know that, but we have to show reality when it comes to vulnerability, not perfection, because by showing reality, people are able to learn. We don't need to show the marriage that is perfect in the sense that, yeah, you don't have any disagreements, you don't have any quarrels, you don't have moments where you just think, you know what, how did I get here? But you have to, you know, and you have to do that in a safe space as well. That's another thing, but that's for a different conversation. So being able to show a reality of vulnerability rather than perfection is what I believe men should strive for. So in conclusion, I want to say that vulnerability should be looked at from a positive way and not a negative way. And that, especially for us as men, we should look to create a space where people can be vulnerable with us, where we can be vulnerable with others. And while we do that, when it comes to our marriages and our relationships with our mothers, our sisters, our wives, we can be, better suited to serve them and to honor them as well. So thank you for listening. I hope you can take some things that will help you to explore the word further. So
yeah, that was great. That was great. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you touched on vulnerability as courage, because I'm sure everybody knows I'm a huge fan of Brené Brown, and that's her whole thing in terms of being vulnerable and, you know, daring to lead from a place of vulnerability. It's a sign of courage and opening that door to allow those conversations. And the scripture that you used is so crucial, isn't it? You know, Paul being in opposition to the Lord, saying, this is my weakness. You know, I've asked you several times to take this thorn away, but no, I'm not. I don't have to take it away. I'm here for you, even in the place where you're weak, and you can rely on me. And that is just fantastic. And I suppose it goes to that song. You can always lean on me, count on me when you need a friend. And that is fantastic. We've got a question for you. So someone sent me a question. So people are sending private questions to
That's good.
And it says, how do we practically deal with the disappointments of being hurt when our vulnerabilities haven't been nurtured properly?
Great question. One that I'm still learning about, but I think, again, for me, I will go back to what the example Jesus set, but also being practical, because obviously where Jesus is Jesus and we are not Jesus. So Jesus said that he, when we didn't even care for him, he did everything for us. He shed blood. So that's one thing I'll say, which encourages me to learn how to be practical where somebody hurts me. But in terms of being practical, you have to realize that our emotions and the way we deal with disappointment comes from a place of how do we want to be loved when we are wronged? Because sometimes somebody will wrong us without knowing. And if it's a case of they do that without knowing, then you have to try to take a step back, because getting hurt is part of life. And it's important for us to know that we deal with it in that way. So I would say, my one practical thing I would say is that whatever the situation is, take a step back as much as you can. Understand and even share that with that person, no matter how hard it will be. And once you do that, you give yourself the chance to let them know where you're at, how that's made you feel. And if that doesn't change, at least you know that you've addressed it in a way that will help you bring some kind of closure to it. And when it comes to relationships as well, there's the aspect of knowing that you're building trust. And if that trust is violated, just know that in the parable of the sower, There were different types of soil that he had to sow the seed on. So if you're a farmer and you're sowing seed, you're going to make sure you prepare the ground where you sow the seed. And the parable of the sower, he sowed, and some of it went to rocky ground, some of it went to good ground, some of it went to thorny ground. He didn't stop sowing after the first time because he knew what he wanted. So if you know what you want out of this friendship or relationship in general, you will keep sowing to get what you want. So have in mind what you want out of that situation as well. And once you know what you want out of the situation, I believe the way you address it will help you. I can't say this is the process to follow. I think that thought process will help.
That is great, actually. You know, vulnerability, developing trust, cultivating trust in our relationships is so crucial. We have one last question before we let you go and bring Ayo in. The question is, how can you encourage vulnerability from your brothers in Christ without sending any wrong signals that you're interested in them?
Repeat the question, please.
How can you encourage vulnerability from your brothers in Christ without sending any wrong signals that you're interested in them?
Wow. Wow. I would say, yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure right now.
Okay.
Think about it and then share on it.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
But what I would say for now, this is me being a little vulnerable because I'm not going to just say something just to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a small example of how sometimes being vulnerable, because you didn't invite me here because I know everything. But sometimes when we give people that space to share, the perception can be that, oh, they've done all their research, so they know everything. But I'd say I'd like to think about it while it speaks, and then I'll get back to you on that.
Fantastic. That is awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. We'll see you again in the Q&A. Thank you for that. That was fantastic. So
you muted yourself, Dami.
Okay.
Hello, can you guys
hear me? Hello, Ayo. Yes, we can hear you. Fantastic. So we've got Ayo Oduniyi. He is the leader at In Youth in London. He is the founder of 412 Men, which is a fantastic group that brings men together, encouraging them to pray and to disciple them in Christ. He is the husband of one wife. He is also a published photographer and the founder of A&O Studios. Welcome, Ayo.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Danny, for having me, man.
Awesome.
Gosh, good stuff, man. You guys have covered all the topics. The joys of going last. Nice way of getting out that question as well, Josh. A very interesting question, to say the least. I definitely have my answer on that one, but I'll let you answer it. But yeah, guys, literally, normally it would have been nice to see some faces rather than seeing names and just like grey screens, but you know, we bless God. I see you there, bro. I see you there. But yeah, man, I'm gonna get straight to it. I'm sure there's lots of questions. I'm sure this is a Q&A session that people want to get into. So yeah, I think obviously Jeff and Josh have kind of defined the vulnerability word. I think for me it was interesting hearing the definition of it, even though I was researching it, because obviously one could argue there's an element of, you know, negative, so to speak, connotations to the whole essence of it being around the possibility of being attacked or harmed. Now, I'm saying these things on purpose because, you know, when men hear words, you know, how we understand what we're hearing is very different to what a woman maybe actually be saying. You know, one of the first rules in counseling is that you need to hear what your wife is saying behind what she's saying. You know, she's not just saying what she's saying for no reason. There's normally a message behind it. And, you know, if we're going to be honest with a man, you know, once again, I'm going to generalize, but you guys bear with me, hear me out. If a man does head the vulnerability, you know, it like Josh said, it probably mirrors more to weakness than it does strength. You know, and I think when I hear, you know, men being vulnerable, what I'm really hearing is that I want him to tell me how he feels. That's what I'm really hearing. That's if I'm going to be honest with you. That's what I hear. I'm hearing, I don't know what's going on inside of him. I don't know what he's thinking or how he's feeling. He's not really saying that everything is yes, no, everything's black and white. and women like to bond on an emotional level. I'm sure those of us that are married, our most intimate times with our wife has been when they get to hear our hearts, and vice versa. They feel like they know us, we're getting closer. Oh, he told me how he feels. My wife likes to even schedule time to ask me, how do you feel? Like, sometimes I'm like, well, what do you mean, how do I I'm self-aware to a degree, but at the same time, men are naturally disposed to just talk about how they feel all the time. We get on with it, and I think that's one of the beauties of being a man, the resilience and strength and endurance that we have in that sort of way. But at the same time, to be a healthy home man, and I think that's why we do marry women and not marry men, is that they bring out that side of us to be open. I know for me, when on my first devotional on honeymoon, I was praying and whatnot, and the Holy Spirit was listening to me and telling me, I want you to die. I said, what kind of word is that, mate? You know what I mean? Like, I want you to die to some. I want you to like lay your life down. Like, I've called you in this marriage, I've called you to die. And as I was studying it a bit more in Ephesians 5 and so forth, he eventually led me to Genesis 2:25. This is the first description we have of man and wife and what God had to say about them. And he said they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not unashamed. I'm going to read it in the NLT because it kind of expounds a bit more in our English. Now the man and his wife were both naked. Yeah, so they were naked. But they felt no shame. So when I hear those two words, I hear nakedness, I hear honesty, I hear you see me as I am, I'm just telling you the truth. But when I hear unashamed, I hear transparency. I hear the ability to tell you the hidden thing about me, and I don't have any fear or any shame of what that is or what you respond to that. Yeah? So those two parts there are key, because a marriage or union or relationship needs honesty and transparency. So like, it's one thing, so I see like this, being naked can be seen as the sexual intimacy part. You're both naked when you have sex, you're both coming together as one. But the unashamed part is where, I heard it from another preacher talking about, it's one thing to be vulnerable or being, open or naked, having sex, but it's another thing for you to share the deepest recesses of your heart with another individual. If anything, that's probably the most part, especially for men, to do that requires a word called trust. I know for me, that's what I had to do on honeymoon. Holy Spirit led me to share with my wife my heart, the deep recesses of my heart. And it was scary, it was vulnerable. It was all of that. And it was beautiful because there was, on the other side of doing it, there was a relief, there was a bonding, there was a union that we were forming where I felt like, yeah, Genesis 2:25 came to life. We're both naked and we're both unashamed. I shared mine, she shared hers. And I think the key part here that I'm even saying here is that even I initiate that conversation. And sometimes, in this talk that we're talking sometimes, and what I've learned in my little years of marriage is that if a man can take lead in doing something, i.e. open, honesty, or these sort of like, transparent conversations, it kind of shows the wife the thoughtfulness that he has in considering her in what he is thinking and going through. And I've realized that touches them more than whatever I buy them, whatever I do for them. Like there's the thoughtfulness. One day I was just bringing out the clothes to dry and whatnot, and Susan was at work. I worked from home and she came home. And the fact that I thought about doing it and I did it, it blessed her the most. And I'm thinking, all this other stuff that I'm sweating my head for. But it's the thoughtfulness. Once again, I think Jeff touched on it, the emotional processing of the heart behind the action. The fact that I didn't have to tell him, he thought about doing it. You understand, guys? So I feel like behind the vulnerability part of it, there's this thing where obviously the questions have been like, how do we do this? How do whatever? Women are trying to open the door that they can't actually open. that a man who's led by the Spirit, I believe what all Christians say, so I can talk a bit spiritual, is ought to be taking leading if we're going to call yourself the man of the house or the head of the home. I'm not saying if you don't all the time that you're not, but it's a thing for men to now realize that if I'm going to call myself a husband, you know, and that's wife, this naked and unashamed are key components that are foundational to our marriage and how both of us can grow healthily and effectively. So yeah, naked, being honest, being open and unashamed, being transparent. Transparency talks about bearing yourself as you are, nothing hidden, everything inside, you know. So yeah, those would be my few words. I can ramble for a long time, as you guys can know. So I want to just nip it there and let those 2 words really sit with us, being naked and being unashamed. I think it's more towards the men than it is the women, obviously, but yeah. Amen, amen.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that scripture. And, you know, it's so important in terms of the fact that is how it was at the beginning. And so, you know, and, you know, Jesus says that in the beginning it was not so. And then obviously the curse came and things, you know, we then started going in lots of different directions. And we then have to try to get ourselves back to what it was supposed to be at the beginning when God created this union between man and wife, to leave and cleave. I think we had one of the questions that we sent across, and it was a comment by a man talking about a woman using his vulnerability against him, or you know, mocking it in terms of when he opens up. What can you say to that in terms of advice to women on how to handle a man's vulnerability when he is naked and unashamed, when he's opened that door to let her in, and perhaps she's responded in the wrong, you know, in a wrong way? Because I'm coming at it from not necessarily from the point of view of a vindictive woman. Let's put those kind of people aside. Let's just talk about somebody who just wasn't aware that a man could be vulnerable, or hasn't been brought up to see the softer side of a man, or the vulnerable side of a man, and just doesn't respond in the right way. What would you say to both of them in that situation to try to bring healing and start to rebuild that?
I think it comes back to the whole, you know, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8, when we look at what love looks like. You know, it's patient, it's kind, it's not easily irritated, does not keep record of wrong. And I always tell my guys, read that scripture over and over again and measure your manhood against that, because I think, you know, because I could give 1, 2, 3 steps, or I could tell you how does your love in your heart for your partner motivate you to respond. And I'm putting it out like that because this means you now have a responsibility to know and learn your partner. The way that I may be able to connect and, you know, let Susan know that I'm hearing her when she's being vulnerable, it's going to be very different to another woman. That's based on how she is and how she's grown up, you know, love languages, blah, 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 blah. So the key is to be able to learn. And the reality is this: you may get it wrong sometimes, you may get it right sometimes, but over time, you know, there will be that grace to grow in it. But I think the main key thing is that sensitivity, which I think women are more prone to do than men, if I want to be honest, just to be able to handle it with care and definitely not ever in your life use it against him. The minute you do that, the door is going to be shut for however long until he's willing to open it again. So I would say, I would say that's the sensitivity of and the care, and that's the whole, let the 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8 kind of like direct you in being kind and being patient and being soft and being, you know, being careful, not being quick to give solutions or answers, just being there, being present, just holding it down, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So yeah, literally, that's what I would say, really. So yeah.
That's fantastic. That is great. And I love that. Measure your manhood against 1 Corinthians 13. That is fantastic. And I just want to go back to the beginning. You said that you had an answer for the lady who asked that question about for the brothers in Christ. Let's hear your opinion, and then we'll get back to Joshua answering.
Yeah, because the thing is, I like to listen to the question, because the question insinuated that if she did it, it may show that she may have feelings.
Yes.
I'm looking at how she's wording it on purpose, because if she's going to ask us that question and is saying that she doesn't want to show that, then that tells me you're not in a position or the person to ask that question.
Okay.
I would rather encourage you to maybe speak to other guys that know him to talk to him about it. Because in my opinion, I'm not sure if your relationship isn't like that, romantic.
Yeah.
How much so should a man really have to be vulnerable with you?
Okay.
That's what I would really argue.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's what I would really argue.
Okay.
Men aren't vulnerable with men enough. You don't want him to be vulnerable with a girl that's even his girl. What are you talking about, mate? Nah, mate.
that makes sense. I actually didn't think about it that way, but that makes sense. So there's try not to get into that space with the man if you're not going to look for a relationship of covenant with him, and let him speak to his brothers in Christ.
But and I think, and the reality is, the issue of why men can't even do it with women is because we don't do it a lot amongst ourselves. That's the real issue here. Yeah. I'm not going to jump the gun too early, but that's the real issue here. So able to practice that in community and friendship with one another, then it makes it a lot more easier for us to do it in a place of when it becomes romantic with other women. How many of us guys can say that our dad's been vulnerable with us? I'm sure hardly any of us. I see my dad cry once when his mum died. That was it. You understand? I'm 30 years old now. So so you understand? So there's so much layers to this as to why men aren't, and it takes a lot of courage and strength, for a man to even start doing it now, especially with his significant other, which it should be easier to do with a woman because he loves her. So, but even that, we can all attest it's not as easy as well because, so
that is a fantastic answer. Thank you so much for that, Ayo. So I'm just going to bring in Jeff and Josh so we can start our Q&A. We've had some questions come through on Slido, and we've had quite a few questions come in privately on the chat as well. Josh, did you have any other answers to that question, or are you happy with Ayo's answer?
Yeah, I'll say what I now have thoughts on. But, for somebody to feel like they're giving off the wrong signals or the wrong impression by just simply encouraging somebody, all I'll say to that is, when you love one another like Christ says we should, or you love someone like a brother, like a friend, you have to be genuine with it. So all I can say is be genuine in how you get that message across. Whatever that looks like for you, be genuine, and don't try and make it sound inspiring. Don't try and make it sound what it's not. Get the message across, because we often hear that, let's say, for example, women say, oh, she was giving the guy signals, but he didn't pick them up. Maybe that's not how he communicates. So just because your signal didn't get received does not mean he's not interested, number one, or number two, it does not mean that he didn't see them. He just probably doesn't know that's a way you're communicating to him. So be effective in your communication. And I believe that will eradicate any of those uncertainties, because that question is asking about encouraging somebody to be more basically, to be unashamed in expressing himself. So that's what I'd say. Haven't thought about it.
Yeah, that is great. And I think a lot of women send signals. I think it was Jeff that was talking about it in terms of wearing an earring or wearing a wristwatch or something. And it's so funny, like today I put on these earrings and my aunt gave it to me, and she's on the call and she'll see it and she'll know that she gave it to me and she'll be happy that I love it. But she'll understand that because she's a woman. And so we have our ways that we communicate. And so, as a woman, if I see someone wearing something that I gave them, I feel happier because, oh, well, they do like it and they're using it. But men are not as, the way they communicate is a lot different. I think being direct, being honest, being open, just saying it as it is. No, I don't know what the word is, but just be as direct as you need to be. Yeah, just be as direct and open and honest and polite as you need to be. That is fantastic. So we've got one question here in the chat, and it says, what about vulnerability in a relationship before marriage?
Okay, so yeah, I saw that question. I know, well, while the others were speaking, I felt like, oh, it must feel quite unfair. We're talking a lot about marriage. But again, eventually you realize that most of us will spend most of our lives married anyway, so it won't seem unfair in a few months to years time, hopefully. But yes, about vulnerability for unmarried people, vulnerability comes with time, and I think that's what everyone has agreed on. Trust builds with time. Okay, many of us have experiences where we've told people things too early. We can only say too early now with the benefit of hindsight. You've told someone something, the person hasn't been able to handle it. And this is for male and female. So most of us, we build these layers to protect ourselves. And again, that's not a bad thing, it's a human thing. So what I'll say is we'll take it step by step. Personally, for myself and my wife, the things that I eventually opened up and told her and the things that she found out about me, she found out in layers. And we should be patient with the layers, because at the beginning point of a relationship, if you know some things about your spouse that you probably will know later, I don't think you'll be able to handle it. There are things I know now about my wife that if I had known in the first few weeks of our dating, I would have left. To be honest, I would have walked away, because at that point it would have looked impossible to handle. So we have to go with the process. And likewise, there are things she knows about me now that if she knew about me in the first 3 months, it'd be like, oh my God, this guy. So we have to take it easy. But yes, you're going to know the times to open up. And when those times come, if you find that whoever he or she is not on your wavelength, you just have to either wait, pray through it, and just see. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule to know that. But yes, it comes with time is the summary of what I'll say.
Yeah.
Does anybody else on the panel have anything to add to that?
Yeah. I would say, before marriage, I would say, I'm trying to find a way to say it without sounding higgy-hagger. But I would say, I definitely agree with what Jeff's saying, time and stuff. But because I think, like you said, there's the whole thing of opening a Pandora box. The whole awakening love before it's time. That's very crucial in this area. And there's an element of stages or progress that one must take in that. When it's the right time to share X, Y, and Z. So the same thing I didn't know about my wife until we got in an engagement period where we had to be like, look, we're taking to the next level now. What else do I need to know to make sure that the decision I'm about to make, I'm willing to take it, all the way, you understand, kind of thing. So I feel like one should pace themselves before, in the stage before marriage, and shouldn't be so quick for that to be something that is like a deal breaker or something that's a marker as to oh well, X, Y, Z. Obviously, you're in love, so there's an element of sharing feelings and whatnot. But I would say there should be a caveat around it, and as the stages of the relationship develop, before you start, seeing vulnerability in a particular way. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. What I'm saying, I'm just basically saying, be cautious and don't do something early. And take time. Take time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Let me add to that as well, because what I was going to say in response to that was about just guarding your heart. And even we're talking about vulnerability today, and I'll speak from a guy's perspective. If a guy's at a stage where you're in a relationship and you're thinking about where to go next, being vulnerable with your friends, your male friend, to talk about it, to be accountable. We hear the word accountability in our Christian circles a lot, but when it comes to being accountable, this is another space where you being open and vulnerable with a friend that you trust, of course, that you respect, who also respects you. You create that space where you can reflect with that person, share, open your mind up. And then when you are in the position where you're more assured about being able to open up so that your relationship can grow, then you can do so. So I'd say guard your heart and know that there's time for everything. It's a journey. And as long as the intention to go on the journey is there, when you're vulnerable, that person will respect it, and they should. And so I'd say guard your heart and just know that it's a journey. So you're going to have to lay it back as you go along.
That's great. We have a question here that says, and I think it's for Ayo in terms of answering that question earlier about the lady who didn't want to portray that she was catching feelings. And it says, so is he saying that men should not be vulnerable with female friends?
Men don't need to be vulnerable. Female friends, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Keyword, don't need to be.
Yeah.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
I guess the 21st century people believe differently nowadays, but
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, you don't need someone in your parking slot when it's supposed to be empty. So we've got another question. When should courting start? And should unmarried couples who are working and hoping for marriage attend and grow in the same church?
A few questions in one, I guess, then. So when should courting start? They attend the same church? Courting, is it? Okay.
You want to go first?
I'll have a go. So when should courting start? I can't give you a particular, to be honest, but again, that's down to the two people in that situation being, again, understanding with each other. So courting should start once there's the intention to know that, you know what, I want to intentionally begin this process with marriage in mind. Because if you don't have marriage in mind, my would be, don't bother. Just if it doesn't go down the line and end up in marriage, it's not meaning you've wasted your time. Because if you're being honest and intentional about building something with somebody with the bigger picture, which is marriage, not that person, but marriage, as you go along, if it does break up, you can know that, you know what, in that time you've had with that person, you've been able to sow into them and add to them so that they can be better for whoever it is that their suitor is. So my advice would be, what I'd say to that is, there's not really a time to start courting. It can depend on so many things. Let's say you're 23, the lady's 23, the guy's 25. They might decide to start courting then. There's nothing wrong with that. They might think, you know what, let's just give it some more time, because let's say they can say they have time. But if somebody's at, say, 40, that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. Someone's 40, a lady's at 40 as well. They might feel that, you know what, the reasons why they want to start the journey are different to somebody who's at 23, 24, even 19. So I wouldn't say there's a time to start. That comes down to the two people and how much they are growing in their journey. As for the other one, again, I wouldn't see anything wrong with that. If based on where you live, where you work, you've chosen a church. Eventually, you're going to get down that point anyway, where when you do get married, you're going to have to go to a church. So if you could start before that, then again, do so, but in mind with the boundaries that you have to set. So that's what I'd say to that. There's nothing wrong with going to the same church before you get to that position.
100%. Yeah, I would agree with Jeff. You know, when should courting start? You know, that's entirely up to you. If you're gonna ask me my counsel on like, you know, at what stage of life, I would say where definitely you are a bit clued up with where you're going and what you're doing. Not saying you have to be 100%, but you know, a man, you know, especially if you're going to have the hindsight, the foresight of, you know, going to marriage and whatever, there should be a level of competent understanding of where you're going, what you're doing. You know, what journey are you taking that girl on? You know, where are you going? What's your vision? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and so that I would definitely say that should be one of the key things that you want to kind of have. Yeah. You know, by the time you want to start courting, that's so that there's direction and purpose. Sure. You know, and those things there help you choose someone a lot more easier. Yeah, then that's, you know, figuring out, it's like, oh, you like what you see, blah blah. You know, wasting people's time. And the second part of the question, I would say, yeah, that can be neither, you know, here or there. Whether you go to church or not, shouldn't be an issue. You know, I'm probably a bit more of a fan of maybe somebody not from the same church. Sometimes, you know, everything's not going right. It's politics, you know, same church, you know.
You got to handle that, haven't you?
Yeah. Oh, he was with her before. She was with her, you know, all that higgy hagga, you know. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Yeah.
Man.
Everyone wants to be the first, you know.
It's true.
But sometimes, you know, and even sometimes in the marital counseling, it's a lot more healthier when you have two different inputs as well.
Yeah.
You need as much counsel as possible, you know, and like, you know, sometimes let's say the guy's been there all his life and you just come recently, you know, you may feel the pastor may have a bit more of a bias towards the guy or towards the girl. You know, there's all the sort of stuff there. So try to think about it as humanly as possible. And that's, you know, sometimes there's two separate parts is really healthy, allows different inputs, more counsel, and you can never have enough counsel on something as well. So yeah, that's my answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, in multitude of counsel, there is safety. We've got another question. It's been asked in 3 different ways, but the summary of the question basically is, where does the culture of shaming men for crying come from, and what can we do about it? Because women are not afraid of the tears of men, but men are more likely to be afraid of the tears of women.
Loaded question.
Good question.
Yeah, very good question.
Okay. Should I? Okay, all right.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the first question, where does it come from? Well, it's got so many, I don't know if you want to go into history, but I think it's come from a world system which has been mostly in the favor of men all the decades and centuries coming. And I say it has been in the favor because for so long, men have been the heads of the homes, the kings, the rulers, and we've always been seen as the strong one or the strong ones. And we've accepted that role. Now, to be the strong ones, it also means that you should provide comfort and security to other people. So for so long, when there's bad news coming, you're expected to be the sound, reasonable one to comfort the others and take the decision and move on. I think 3 of us have said the same thing in different ways, but generally men like to, I don't know if it's a like thing or if it's just something we do. And to be honest, like I say, there's an aspect of biology from the hormones, but there's also the aspect of what the environment and what we've been taught all our lives. So it's a multifactorial thing. And it's not something that you're not going to just train men differently to say men should begin to cry, okay? The fact that men do not cry or cry shaming, as we call it now, the fact that men who cry are mocked or are looked down as different doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly change that and make men, you're going to make men cry a lot more. I guess what I'm trying to pass across is we have to know what we expect of men, okay? Because remember what emotions are. You're not just dealing with what people feel, you're dealing with where they're coming from. So that you cannot understand, to be honest, in 3 months or 3 years, what a 30-year-old man has gone through and experienced. So the first thing we have to recognize that there's so many factors why that is. But about the culture, I agree that men should be allowed to express their emotions, if that is tears or if that is laughter or whatever it is. And I think what we can do is educate ourselves to be open, educate ourselves to be honest. I believe so much in honesty. I believe so much in simplicity and just saying things as they are. I believe that when people are honest with each other, then we'll see the true emotions come out. But the fact that you give a man bad news or something terrible happens and he doesn't cry doesn't mean that he's trying not to cry. Because I also get this. Some people think that because a man isn't crying is because he's pretending or he's hiding. It's not always so. Sometimes you process, or let me speak for myself. I'll speak for only myself. Sometimes I process bad news in a reflective way. And I go back and I think and I pray. I don't necessarily cry. Other times I feel the urge or the emotion to cry, but I'm not going to break out, and it's not me, and it's not because I'm fighting it. It's just where I am. And again, I'm learning to accept that ladies in my life will accept bad news or sad things differently, and even good news. Good news will not necessarily make me break out in tears, but it will make others break out in tears. The point is, I guess what I'm saying is, we should allow people be. If you have a crier as a husband, and I say crier not in a derogatory way, please, it's just a descriptive term. If you have a crier as a husband or a boyfriend, accept that as who he is. But if you have one who isn't, accept that as who he is as well, because you don't want to think that your man is bottling up something when he genuinely isn't. He's just processing. So that's one aspect of the question. I just wanted to pass that across, but I'm sure Josh and Ayo will say more about it. So.
Very good, Jeff. Yeah, it's Sorry, remind me of the question again, please. I was so engaged what you're saying. Dami, what was the question again, please?
It was several questions, but the summary was, where does the culture of shaming men for crying come from, and what can we do to change that stereotype?
Yeah, it's definitely from a narrative of what's been pushed out in the avenues that we look into, be it the news, be it sports, be it when you're being beaten as a child and they're like, don't cry, just firm it, that sort of thing. So, and even I believe there's a part of the question that said, because men are afraid of tears. To be honest, men are afraid of their own tears. Sometimes a man's tears can scare him, let alone somebody else, because it just opens up that person in the state that they're just there. That's the only way they can express how they feel at that point in time. So there's one thing to know what our environment portrays to be a man, the definition of a man and manhood and masculinity. But it's also important to, like I said earlier, be able to create a reality around what a man should be rather than perfection. Perfection is where we've lost that element of men being men, whatever that looks like. So I'd say it's a combination of those things, of culture, of the environment, and what is portrayed in society.
That's good.
That's great. We've got another question. It says, how can a sensitive woman handle a man who doesn't express any sort of vulnerability and is always conveying an I don't care attitude?
She's in for a ride. That's the real honest truth, right? You're in for a journey and a ride. Yeah, you really are. You know what I'm saying? You're really in for a journey. And I think they need to, sorry, like maybe may require, couple counseling, like further input outside of themselves, the people that they trust or they admire and so forth. And because clearly there's a way. I think also another question, even with the whole sense of men that that are criers and men that aren't, sometimes that may even be a response of how they grew up. Maybe they were just prone to crime a lot and they weren't necessarily stopped or were allowed to do that or whatever, and they're just going up that sort of way. I was listening to TJX one time, he's just talking about even like mannerisms and stuff. Some of us may say certain guys are a bit, what's the word? A bit bent because they speak in a particular way, but maybe that's the context on how he grew up. He's heterosexual, but he just has mannerisms that are part of the people that shaped him. You know what I mean? Yeah, he was shaped by sisters. So he grows up, he's a bit more, he talks like this, talks like that's because of his content. Doesn't mean that it's not a man. Just, I feel I'm saying that. So maybe the guy, the husband, has just hasn't been taught or hasn't seen or doesn't even know how to express. You know what I mean? You can't expect marriage to undo whatever years of being one way to do. Therefore, input is needed. Patience is going to be needed. A journey is about to be embarked upon. You know what I mean? So that would be my real down to earth counsel advice of that. And she can, by the grace of God, continue to share herself as well. Sometimes doing that with the guy gradually will break down barriers. When he sees his wife vulnerable continuously, it may move him to also replicate and to meet her where she's at as well. Those sort of ways do draw a guy in, but she's in for a journey. That's to be very frank, especially sensitive, and he's not. It's going to take time.
And just to piggyback on that, John Eldridge said that masculinity is bestowed from one generation to another. So men learn how to be a man from the men in their lives as they grew up. And so mums, however hard we try, and we do try, we cannot really teach our sons about manhood the way that it's supposed to be taught. And the question, piggybacking off that statement that I just made, is on Slido, an anonymous question, and it says, with all the resources available in 2020, men have no excuse for improving themselves. It's not a woman's job to save anybody. It's not my statement.
It's all right.
Yeah.
But going into what I had said initially in terms of us as women not being able to teach manhood, because we do try really hard to do that, and we're more likely to want to have these discussions and tell me how you feel and what exactly is going on in your mind, and why did you feel this way. A lot of times men need to have these conversations with another man. They need to see it portrayed from another man. So for this person's question, in terms of all the resources that are available, what advice would you give to men who are not at that point yet where they are vulnerable, or they see the value in vulnerability, or the value in being open with the person that they're going to go into covenant with? How would you encourage them to, I've got ideas about discipleship, about getting a mentor and things like that, but from your side of you as a man, what would you say to them, and how would you tell them to learn?
No. Should I chip in something, Ayo? Because let me just say something very, very brief. I hear comments like this, and they make me laugh. The reason why they make me laugh, with all due respect to, because I told you I'm pretty honest, so with all due respect to the asker, probably is online. You have to recognize that men don't, I don't know, but a man doesn't grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to be a man. I don't know how to put it. We are people, okay? We are people. We grow up, we have our life experiences. I didn't grow up when I was 10 years old thinking this is how I'm going to be a man at 30, and I was making active plans, okay? And at the same time, I did not expect that I will begin to train or groom my future wife on who I expect her to be. There's this urge that, or there's this need that I don't get, where people want to teach or educate men on how to be men.
Come on.
The first thing is that the whole notion of that is repulsive, and I speak for me, because it gives me this feeling of somebody's trying to control me or change me.
Come on.
If you come from that angle, you have lost the conversation. Honestly, if you bring that angle, I'm sure you can see the three of us reacting the same way. If you just tell a man that, you've lost the man. If you say you want to make a better person, oh, trust me, I'm very open for that, because I want a better wife. But I don't want a better wife because she's my wife or because she's my woman. I don't know how to put it. I'm not trying to shape her. And this idea that the picture of a man that somebody else has is the picture of, or is the man that should be, I don't know where we got it from. The truth is that if you're dating someone and the man you have, if that's the man you see, that's the man that you see.
Yeah.
There is the only perfect image of a man we have is the Lord Jesus Christ. You are not going to get the 21st century man. And with all due respect to whoever you're quoting about men only bringing up men, I did my face like, because single moms bring up men. My father did not train me. I know some dads do this and sit down their sons and tell them, you will be a man and do that. But that happens a lot more in the movies. Our parents bring us up to be people, and they teach us good character. They teach us to go to church. They teach us to love others. They don't actively tell you, this is how to be a man and this is how to be a woman. And this whole gender struggle, and I get where it may be coming from, because like I alluded to earlier, a lot of times women have been pushed down, and no one should argue that, and that's not right, okay? So I can appreciate, and I do agree that people, not men, people need to learn, people need to grow, we need to be educated, but let's not make it a men need to be educated and I don't have to do the job. No one really asks any woman to do the job anyway. So let's not look at it from that angle. That's also what I'm going to say. I'm sure Ayo will say nicer things in a nicer way, but please, I just want to get that point across. And if I'm too harsh, I'm sorry, but I'm just being honest.
No, thank you for that. I think that really, the question did come from a certain bias, so it is important to be able to address that and just to explore that, and that's why we're here. And I think that's the beauty of people being able to send in anonymous questions as well, just so that they can have their opinions answered and addressed as well. So over to you, Ayo.
Yeah. So I'm going to emphasize with this statement and say the reason why it even exists is because this is what women have been doing. let's be honest. If we're going to the culture of the day, women have been shaping their man into, women love, you know, culture. It's even innate in nature. So in one sense, it's not even a bad thing, but then obviously you don't tell a man that you're doing it. You just got wisdom and do it anyway. Like, I want to break it down a bit more. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause I definitely agree with my brother. If a woman comes to me, I want to change this, I'll be like, bedroom, I'm me. Like, you know, but there's a way that she can suggest or prepare or insinuate or advise or counsel, you know, and that's the whole nature and the purpose of the relationship. You know, a woman being at the best of a man being at the best of the woman. So the attitude of the question is really intriguing because, you know, she's saying it's not my, you know, all the resources in the world, blah, blah, like, I'm like, so what? Are you telling me to be a man is a textbook degree? No, it's not. It's not. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And the only thing I'll disagree with Jeff, and I think even the fact that he alluded to the fact that obviously how our parents raised us, I think the fact that there wasn't even an emphasis on you're a man and a woman and being raised in that sort of way is why we have the issue today. That our fathers should have been bringing us in on what it is to be a man from early, so to speak. You see in other Jewish cultures, and we see the relationship bond between father and son. And I think the context of John Eldridge's statement is that, you know, manhood isn't just put from the sky. You know, as human beings, we pattern what we model, what we see, and it has to be seen, it has to be modeled, it has to be passed on in that respect, not just something that we do. I'm a man. When Paul said, "I become a man," Paul had to acknowledge that he had to put away childish things. So there was a distinctive between thinking like a child and thinking like a man. There was a time that came where he realized that when I became a man, I put away change. You understand? So when that time is down to your reasoning, your thinking, and you know your ability to grow up, so to speak. So you know, once again, you know, she's right in one perspective. It's not her responsibility, of course not. And this is why men having community, men having brotherhood, you know, fathers being present, you know, us our brothers being there for our little brothers and our big brothers, like actually doing life together is crucial in these things there where we become more healthy, more well-rounded, and more whole. Being around other men that don't look like you. Being exposed to different, you know what I mean, kind of thing. You like that, you know, amongst ourselves, so to speak. So I think that those are practical things that guys can do, you know. That's my whole heart behind 412 Men, like building a place where men can come and be themselves, hear other men, talk, be vulnerable, grow, build community, and so forth, you know. And my goal is that through that, you know, it will grow better men that will become good husbands and better, you know, and then the cycle will continue, so to speak. So that's what I would say that will really help with manhood. It's not something that's in the sky. It's something that we learn from one another, gel, grow together, you know. It's being able to be submissive to another man and being told no, and being told you know what I mean? All those aspects, you know, I can go on for days, but that's what I would say practical for men to prepare to be men.
Have we got time for me to add to this, Dami? Cool. The only one thing I'll start with this, and the notion that what women have been doing, women have felt they had to do that because men have been absent in some capacity, which has been mentioned by both Ayo and Jeff. With that being said, that does not mean that men are still not, men should not be given the chance to do what they need to do. So I think, like Ayo was saying, where a man is able to be vulnerable with other men, it creates that unity and that bond. If a man cannot be vulnerable with another man, like it's been said already, it will be much harder for him to be vulnerable in a relationship with a woman, marriage. And so that's important to create that environment. As to how to be a man and the resources that are there, the three of us could have come here today and just rattled off things we found out online, and it would have added value to any of you, or even us for that matter. So it's not just about information, it's about the reality of things, because people have done their research based on a particular set of circumstances. As expensive as it may have been, it is not the reality in which we're in. So we can learn from it, of course, but we have to then make informed decisions based on somebody's research anyway. So why not start by living it first of all? And then as you're living it, you then look at the other reality elsewhere, and then you're making better and better decisions. So yes, there's a lot of information and context out there because of the nature of technology and involvement. That's all great. But at the same time, this is not a physical thing. It's not a physical thing. So you can't just look at it straight up. And yeah, we acknowledge and we appreciate the women who've done that. Don't get it misunderstood, because women have been solid pillars in society for men who have not had that father figure, even if the father is in the picture and they're not being the father they need to be. The women have been doing what they need to do. So it's not just about the figure being present physically. Sometimes present physically will do what it needs to do, of course, but it needs to go beyond that. So vulnerability is something which we just can't see it, but we know it's an absolutely key part of the relationships in life. But when it comes to relationships in love and marriage, key ingredient, because without it, you'll just stall and there won't be any growth and the journey will be very difficult. So yeah, it's something that isn't just black and white.
That is great. We've got a comment on here. I think it's from a gentleman, and he says, everyone is vulnerable to somebody. Patience and trust is key. She needs to let go of her expectations and be her and open up and trust that one day he would appreciate and open up to her. Do we feel, gentlemen, please let us know, do you feel as though women are always trying to change a man or improve him or turn him into an image of something that she has in her head, as opposed to accepting the person she has in front of her?
Yeah.
And does this then become a problem for vulnerability? T.D. Jakes often says that he needs to find a woman who is like Delilah, who just accepted her man, and he found a safe place to lay his head on her lap. That can your man come home from a weary day and just come and lie down on your laps and you stroke his head?
That's a wonderful point. I like that one. The Delilah story. Love it.
You know, and it's great for women to think about, because turn Delilah into this pariah. But actually, if you look at her in that context, we might be able to learn certain things about her creating a safe place for her man to be who he needs to be.
Powerful. Yeah. Now, I think, you know, a woman can do both. Remember, like I said, it's one thing for her to tell her man that she's doing that, which he won't, most men won't take unless they're passive men. And it's another thing for her to, creatively, like I said, overtly and in other ways, you know, suggestions and whatnot to do things. Because I do believe God brought a wife to a man for that reason, to take what he had, to take his seed and to multiply it. You know, she's an incubator by nature. She's always thinking of how she can take what's given and more. So that's the beauty of a woman. You know, I'm better now because of my wife. Facts. You understand? Facts. There's no question about that. So in that aspect there, I'm not too, I think maybe the pride of sin may make a woman try to like control a man. You know, the Bible does say that, you know, you have a desire to rule over him, but he'll rule over. That whole aspect can come into it. You know, and obviously, you know, that whole maturity aspect of what you see and what you want, you can try to take over the relationship and become the head of it. You know, those elements can come into play, which aren't healthy or right or biblical. So I think PJ hit the nail on the head. Like having the balance of having vision for your man and the balance of being there for your man. So the balance of being present and still future-minded. Like a woman should, you know, should fight to walk in those two realms, like being here and also, you know, thinking ahead as well. So yeah, literally, because that's a really powerful. First time I've ever heard that. I'm gonna still.
Yeah, it's really good.
Really good. Yeah, it's key. I think most men would appreciate a Delilah. You know.
I agree. Yeah.
We would appreciate somebody we can look up. Because look what she did. She was able to get the secret of his heart through persistence and through comfort.
By allowing him sleep.
Yeah.
And you know what? Once he slept, right?
Yeah.
He'll be in a position where he's so open that whatever it was, you don't even have to ask.
Yeah.
He'll tell you. So a woman's role is so key in the sense that just create the space for the guy.
Wow, powerful.
And he will express himself.
That's good.
In doing that, you give him a chance to do so. And for us as guys as well, it's a similar thing because we serve a different role. So we need to create a space for women to, you know what, be able to multiply and be able to add value to us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Humility, that's good.
Because guys can also try and change women sometimes.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
With wrong execution. So it's a two-way thing in this particular matter. But from our perspective, create the space for us, and you won't even have to ask any questions.
Yeah. I agree.
We've got one more question that I'm going to take. We've got quite a lot on Slido, and I don't think we're going to have enough time to address those. This says that to what extent does cultural context influence the development or non-development of vulnerability? And the context is that of a British-born lady and a Nigerian man.
Born lady who is white, black,
well,
born in general.
Yeah, but let's go with British-born in maybe an African context versus an African context but African-born and grown.
Yeah. Can you just phrase the question again? Just the beginning of the question.
So, to what extent does cultural context influence the development or non-development of vulnerability? And the context is that of a British-born lady with a Nigerian man. So let's say you've got a 26-year-old, 28-year-old lady who's been born and bred in Southeast London versus a man who was born and bred in Nigeria, and they meet in London and they want to start a relationship, and she comes with her modern girl mindset and he maybe has a different mindset in terms of vulnerability. How does culture play a role in that?
1,000%, I would say.
Oh yeah.
You're bringing two different worlds.
Yeah.
I think people underestimate how much that has a big play in marriage. Because I tell people all the time, bro, like you're not marrying quote unquote someone's spirituality. You're marrying their habits. You're marrying the way they think and see things. You're marrying their likes and dislikes. You're marrying the person. You know, that's been, and that person has been shaped in their cultural construct and context. So, you know, I'm being biased and being generalizing it. The guy, the African born, may expect his wife to cook every single day. Let's just be real. You know, in chat, we were both working, fam. Who's gonna come home every day and cook everything? You know what I mean? Let's just be real, guys. You understand? You know, and it's never right or wrong. It's just different contexts. You know, just different way of living life, and you have to find a way to match it together. So I think it plays a massive, gigantic role. That's even how you see your parents in marriage. You'll be surprised how much that affects how you see marriage. There's so much stuff that I absorbed that I just expected because of what I've seen all my life. You understand? You know, it affects it 1,000.
Yeah, because even two people from London coming together still brings its unique aspects anyway. So like I was saying, your cultural aspect makes massive difference. I'm married to a Nigerian, I'm Ghanaian myself. And although there are similarities in the two countries, and obviously they're both West African, but there are differences as well. So no matter how similar you might be in culture, there will still be differences that maybe your parents have portrayed that you would have been exposed to just by nature of you being their child. And so it does play an absolute key role in even how you decide to go. Because for example, I was having the conversation with Dot a while back, and we were saying what by God's grace when children get involved, which language are going to learn, which name are they going to have first, is it going to be a Ghanaian name, or like just different things like that? Are we going to go this way with it or that way with it? And it forms some of the conversations you will have down the line, not just now.
Yeah. So
you have to address those things because they're part of who you are. And when you choose to engage with somebody in relationship and marriage, it's because of who you are at that point in time and things that have made you who you are. So absolutely key.
All I'll add to that, I totally agree with Josh and Ayo. All I'll add to that is, if you're coming from two very different backgrounds, you've got to be really, really patient and not assume at all. There are many things that we take for granted. If you're coming from the same background, there are many things you take for granted. I can tell you, I'm from a different part of Nigeria with my wife, and even that within the same country comes with its own issues. So I can imagine if you're coming from two different countries, two different parts of the world. So it is very, very possible, but you have to, even the things that we call vulnerability, somebody may be more open talking about certain things than others just because of culture. We shouldn't look down on any culture. So you shouldn't feel like one is more progressive than the other. You just have to accept it. And if it's a step that you really want to take, then you have to accept that that's part of the process and take your time. But just like Josh was saying, these conversations, they're going to have to continue. So you don't take anything for granted. You can't assume. You just have to keep pressing on and pressing on. But it will come. It will come with time. People have done it, so you can do it. Yeah.
I'm just going to take one last question, and I think because it is actually an issue in Christian circles, I'm just going to summarize it really quickly because it was sent quite long, and it was that why is it that women are often told that a man has to be ready before they get into relationship with him, and obviously that then causes an issue in terms of, well, she wants him ready and she wants to get married now, but he isn't ready, and well, the man has no vision, he has no clarity, he has no direction. Don't marry a man without vision or purpose or mentor. These kind of teachings that we have in Christian circles. How would you then advise her to maybe create a space for him to feel that, okay, it's all right for us to be here until we get to that place of covenant, while also not wasting her time for somebody that actually might be ready in 6 months with somebody else, but isn't actually ready for her, because there's a fine line in both. It's a complicated question to end on, sorry.
No, that's fine, it's fine. Again, it's, a packed question.
Yeah.
What I would say is that this whole thing about being ready as well, I'll address that first. And again, it's probably again down to as people grow up, women are not, well, the perception is that women are more prepared to approach these things than men. If that's because maybe women are more vulnerable amongst themselves and compared to men as they're growing up, then that's a different analysis to make. But in terms of being ready, if you want to start a journey with somebody and they're not ready, you can't start that journey and then being left behind. So you have to be ready to go. Again, I'll make reference to some scripture, which it's one context, but you can bring it to another context. How can two agree? How can two walk unless they agree? So there has to be agreement. And if the reason why you want to get somebody ready is valid, then I'm sure they will see that themselves. And if you're rushing for something which isn't right, everything takes time to grow. Once you sow a seed, you need to water it, and in due time it will bear fruit. That's just laws of nature. Relationships are things that need to be fed. Relationships need to grow. So what I'd say to that is there's a lot of pressure, and marriage in our culture, especially in West African culture, is put on a pedestal, which oftentimes puts too much pressure on people. I think I will say that. And so it's important to realize that, you know what, the pursuit of marriage is from a good place. And let that be the only thing that pushes you, rather than pressure from family, pressure from friends, pressure from what you see in society. So I think that's what I'd say to that, because there's so much that can be said. But then the most important thing to say is that it's an honorable thing to desire marriage and to work towards it. Work towards it with the right intentions, and God will honor that as you go through that journey.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. Do any of our panelists have anything else to add before we close?
Not really, no.
Ayo, did you have anything else to add to that before we close? Yeah.
No, he did well with the answer.
Right, he did well. There's so much you can say, but you have to.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to break it all down one by one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Serious. Yeah. He said, "I'll leave it there. Yeah."
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've really not been able to answer all the questions. There's so many questions on Slido, in my emails, in the chat. Hopefully we will organize a part 2. If you still have any questions that you want to send, you can drop me a DM on Instagram at damiloves, or you can drop a question on the website at damiloves.com, or drop me an email at damiloveslove@gmail.com. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you everybody who has joined. I hope that this discussion has ministered some grace, some healing, and some encouragement as well. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.
Blessings.
Blessings.